Hafade, inano si Michaeluhan Bavakwa, estigi un episode Fanachu. And normally, of course, for the Fanachu podcast, there is a guest and I'm interviewing them and there is a conversation. But today, because I am traveling, we weren't able to do the usual sort of episode of Fanachu, and so dispensa now. But Fanachu is 9 years old. This podcast was started by then graduate student Manny Cruz, now Dr. Manny Cruz, as part of his work for the Independent Guahan Independence Task Force Media Committee. And this was in 2026, in 2016. And Fanatsu has continued in different forms with different people taking over, such as Lawrence Lizama taking over for several years as host and as producer. Other people such as Albert Tovis, Hannah Rapadulia taking over for quite a while, and now me taking over for the past few years. But Fanatsu is 9 years. All in all, there have been more than 370 episodes of Fanatsu. And Guanabi Hungan kaling lenemlem zunu azui I Hungan I anakuna ini nengnya Hungan. And so in the time sort of in this week, I wanted to take a moment because there was a year in which we were creating Fanachu highlights. Nowadays, of course, we often create Fanachu shorts, 1 minute long shorts for episodes that come out. But for about a year's time, we were releasing regularly, edited by my partner Desiree Perez, Fanachu highlights, where for those who couldn't watch the full Fanachu 1 hour long episode, she would condense it down to a 2 to 3 to 4 minute highlight, sort of highlight video that people could then just enjoy some of the more interesting parts of that episode. And so in reflecting on 9 years of Fanachu and all the many voices, all the many topics sort of that Fanachu has covered in that time, because Fanachu has been a place for Chamorro voices, for solidarity conversations. It's been a place for documenting important stories, for critical conversations. It's been a place for tackling tough issues, all sorts of stuff. And so we can see that we'll see that today in this episode with some of these highlights. How Fanatsu has contributed to stimulating conversations, but also documenting important conversations, and lending support to voices that need more support. And so we're not gonna watch too many. We're gonna watch some, a few, because all in all, there was more than 40 different highlight videos that were created over the course of a year. And we're just gonna watch a handful, about a half a dozen of them, the ones that I chose that were most sort of interesting to me as I looked back on them. And so the first one, so I'm currently in Taiwan filming this. One of the things that I'm doing in Taiwan is talking on behalf of the Guam Museum about a collaboration with the National Museum of Prehistory here about a seafaring exhibit in the next few years, and then a collaboration in which we'll talk about Austronesian seafaring across Taiwan, across Micronesia, across the wider Pacific, exciting opportunities. But there was a period of more than 2 years where Fanatsu had a long-running series on seafaring and navigation, talking to different people involved in revitalizing it, documenting it, educating, and so on. And so for our first highlight, I want us to look at Fanatsu episode 156, in which Dr. Vince Diaz shares his reflection. Dr. Vince Diaz, of course, was very important in Guam in terms of connecting Chamorro efforts to sort of reconnect to their seafaring past with those in other islands in Micronesia. He created a documentary which was so important at that time called Sacred Vessels. And so I invited him on Fanatsu. Oh man, nga way back in 2021. where he could talk about sort of the documentary, but also just about his role in perpetuating Micronesian navigation traditions, but also in innovating it and connecting to also other indigenous seafaring navigation traditions in the United States, in sort of Native Americas as well, amongst Native Americans, indigenous peoples across the United States too. And so let us listen to the highlight from his episode, Fanachu 156.
And that's one of the things that you begin to realize when you start to get to understand how colonialism operates, is that we've also been stripped of many other things, including a kind of cultural heritage. Um, it would get even deeper than that, and consequently, um, where I began to notice about this seafaring tradition, this ability to carve ocean-worthy canoes and sail long distances using knowledge of stars, waves, clouds, and things like that. This was, of course, the story of the Hokulea, part of the cultural revival that was associated with the political renaissance and the radicalization of a new generation of Hawaiians. I was swept up by that move. I was radicalized in college, and so at least on paper, I read everything I could on seafaring. That's how I learned about Rob. There was newspaper articles about him, PDN, keeping up with the PDN. All of my work, I should say, and this sort of sets it up when I returned home in '91. All of the work that I did in graduate school at University of Hawaii, I went on to get degrees in political science, bachelor's and master's, and then go to grad school in Santa Cruz. All of that stuff was about sharpening the analysis of how colonialism operates and its effects on indigenous peoples, and how indigenous peoples can decolonize, and especially look to traditions that had been denigrated as savage or backwards or uncivilized or romanticized as mystical, and as in the way that it still is. It became very evident in immersing myself in the arts and sciences of outrigger building and navigation, that there was a knowledge base here that was also predicated on radically different ways of relating to the world around you. That was that held a lot of promise for customizing an indigenous type of knowledge system that was also potent for decolonizing. Capitalism is just not sustainable. The level of consumption, the kinds of value systems that we have come to embrace, is not sustainable. And indigenous systems are. Indigenous systems that especially have that kinship relation, that relation of stewardship. I'm not all that happy with that word, but that relation of reciprocity with the environment, that doesn't look at the environment as a resource to exploit or to extract. It has a radically different definition of what development means. It has a radically definition of what it means to be human.
Oh, bonito. Ah, tadong sinangani hinasonya na si Dr. Vicente. And so I should note, and I always like to note that, of course, Vince Diaz was my Guam history teacher, and one of the people that really helped get me started on my own journey to become more critical. of the things that I am now known for being critical about. And so remember that all of these episodes, you can find the full episodes audio and video on YouTube, on Spotify, on iTunes, and so on. And so, but a powerful episode from Vince Diaz talking about sort of not just navigation and seafaring as the practices, the canoes, the things themselves, but as it representing an entire, epistemology, an entire worldview that doesn't only go into the stars, but also goes into the relation between the canoe and the world, the people and the world, but also, as he was mentioning towards the end of those highlights, how we relate to the resources, right? How indigenous people relate to the resources of the world. And so something that's even more important than ever in in today's increasingly ravenous capitalistic world. And so our first highlight is out of the way, Fanachu episode 156 from way back in 2021 with Dr. Vince Diaz. And so now for this next episode, I'm in Taiwan. Um, one of the I'm here on behalf of the Guam Museum, but there's also Chamorro dancers that have joined on this trip, that have been invited to participate in an Amis, the largest indigenous group in Taiwan, the Amis Music Festival. They also performed at the National Museum of Prehistory. They've been here for cultural exchanges during this past week. And so Fanachu has been a place in which the issue of Chamorro culture in terms of dance has regularly been discussed and interrogated. And so this has been the case in terms of talking about the history of Chamorro dance, talking also with those who are practitioners of Chamorro dance, talking about the politics of Chamorro dance. And so there's been quite a few episodes in which those who are dancers, those who are fafanagui, those who are teaching Chamorro dance, participating in it, deal with some of the debates around Chamorro dance, some of issues of authenticity, some issues of tradition versus innovation, some issues of the relationship between Chamorro dance and other cultures, in which Chamorro dance may have borrowed from when it was being reinvented and reimagined decades ago. And so, as I said, there have been a few of these types of episodes, but here is one such episode from October 2022, Fanatsu episode. Here we go. Fanatsu episode 122. And so this was an episode in which Vince Regis, sort of who is a master of Chamorro culture for dance, he was teaching a class at UOG, and he brought onto the podcast several of his students who are most of whom were cultural dancers or participate in cultural spaces in different ways. And they talked about some of the issues, some of the politics involved. And so nihita ekunok.
Doing this for 20 years, I've had many of these conversations about what Chamorro dance is, some of the pros, some of the cons, some of the great stuff, some of the hard stuff, some of these conversations. And recently there's been this kind of social media Twitter war. I think that was happening more so among this next generation of Chamorro cultural art practitioners, performing arts practitioners.
Even if they aren't in the performing arts community and really know what we go through. So because of that Twitter debate thing, Mr. Ray just approached me with the idea, and I really thought, we shouldn't have these conversations on social media. We need to just talk to each other about it, not just, make these tweets about each other. If we really want to move forward, if our own Chamorro people, have criticisms and things to say about what other Chamorro people are doing, then we should have that space to talk about it. I don't want to sugarcoat anything. I don't want to beat around the bush. Let's just get to it. People say that we're plagiarizing. People say that we're appropriating. So how are we going to address that?
My generation of parents that are saying, hey, I don't know my language, but I want my kids to know my language. I don't know my culture, so I want my kids to know the culture. So
I mean, even amongst the Chamoru teachers themselves, a lot of them are trying to get into the programs, and they're all learning Chamoru dance, in its simplest form, so that they can teach their elementary students how to dance, along with teaching the culture. A lot of it, when you think about Chamoru dance, we encompass most of the other disciplines. In our dances, a lot of people, like you said, it was just shaking of the hips. But when we do our research, we go back and find all these rituals and ceremonies that used to happen, and we don't perform the ritual, but we display it, we show it, we present it how it was or how it used to be. Such as things such as like the Bailengaput Ulu, the flipping of the hair. It was a practice that was done by our women, and although we don't perform the ceremony anymore, it's a part of our history. And we bring that out in dance. To the untrained eye, that's all that it is okay, girls flipping their hair. But when people study into Chamorro history, which is what we do, we make sense of these things. We bring life to a ritual that has long since been gone.
When we are doing performance arts, when we are dancing, when we are putting it out there, are we authentic in our intention? Why are we doing it? For me, why am I doing this dance? Why do I need to do this Legend of the Flame King? Why does it matter to me? Why does it matter to my family? Why does it matter to my kids? Why does it matter to the world?
Oh, yes. And so that was a very and so that episode came out, of course, there was actually several episodes of Fanachu that were in response to different social media sort of debates and conversations about authenticity and cultural plagiarism. That's right. And so, and that particular episode there was in response to one of those. And it was you know, these are important spaces in which people talk and share, vent sometimes, but also come to terms with the fact, what is it that you are doing, and also accepting the fact that you don't have to do everything. That, that there is sometimes in cultural, one of the things um, in cultural politics, right, is letting go of the idea of authenticity. Because authenticity is something which instinctively maybe people feel that they have to strive for, but authenticity can also be a poisonous idea, a toxic idea too. And so, and so how is that something that has to be moved beyond too? Because if sort of authenticity becomes something which chains you or or suffocates you, if sort of committing if you are committing to the concept of authenticity beyond committing to the life of your people or to the creativity or the energy of your own people, what is the purpose? What is the point? And so across those episodes, you find a lot of those types of difficult conversations. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff too, especially in terms of the issue of plagiarism, cultural plagiarism, because of the origins of the most prominent form of contemporary Chamorro dance, which it borrows heavily from Hawaiian, Polynesian style dance, because of how Frank Robon began his tradition of Chamorro dance, because of who he learned from and who he was authorized to create as who he was authorized to use as a foundation. And so, but we can't get too much into that because that'll be this whole episode. We've got more highlights to look at, but to go through. But remember that all of those Fanatsu episodes, you can listen to them, you can watch them. They're on YouTube, Spotify, and so on. And so, ooh, so the next one that we're going to, well, the next one that we're going to go through, as I said, across Fanatsu's sort of life, there are different series. So we go through different themes, right? So, for example, there's militarization in the Marianas. There's been several dozen episodes that focus on that theme. There's also episodes that focus on Chamorro artists, Chamorro writers. There's also a bunch of episodes that focus on solidarity with other territories of the United States. One of my favorite sort of thematic series, however, is the Learning Chamorro Journeys series. And this series really comes about because of, during the pandemic, my coffee shop classes that I used to have free every week at Java Junction on Guam. I put them on Zoom. I opened it up for anybody, and hundreds of people began attending them. And at a certain point, I basically put out a call to my classes, and I said, "Is anybody interested in talking about their learning journeys in the Chamorro language?" Because too many people feel like you're either fluent or you're not fluent, when in truth, everybody is learning. Nobody is perfect in the language, which means let's stop focusing on either you're 100% or 0%. Let's focus on the journey and the learning. And so I said, who would be interested in just talking about your experience, whether you're fluent already, whether you barely know any Chamorro, focus on how you've been learning, what your struggles have been, what your successes have been. And it's been a very inspiring series. It's helped those who have gone on to be part of it. Sometimes it makes them stronger. Those who are learning, it inspires them to keep learning, seeing those who have been through the struggle, but have persisted, have gotten more fluent. And so what I like to say is it normalizes the idea of Chamorro learning. Instead of it being fluent, non-fluent, 100% zero, it normalizes the learning journey. And so this is the first episode in that series, when it wasn't really a series, it was just an invitation to my Zoom students. And so, Nihita Ega. There's less than 20,000 Chamorros that can speak the language today. Most of them are older. And so it's those are not good statistics, which is why it's so important that everyone who wants to learn Chamorro, that we support them. We give them resources. We guide them.
Anadikiki zo anahobin zo uhumuk I finot Chamorro za ejina utungo I finot Chamorro lo ti kumentusu sesu I finot Chamorro sa importante na utungo I importante pa I mananahu na utungo kumentus ki fino English sa ejui ma expecta giningwahu. Because mangaigi ki class loki mangaigi ki pajitus ki class pajitus za guanabay mengwentusam lo man mamalo ki class. So 21 dia timan mamalo sa timatungo I lingko hakita.
For those who don't know it, there's sometimes a feeling of emotional loss. Why don't I know it? But for those who did learn it, sometimes there's feelings of, why was I punished for speaking it? Why was I told that it was bad to know this language, right? And so when people talk about how, esti decolonization, tibaliano, importantiano, there's many ways that we can talk about decolonization, and one of them is strengthening our relationship to our language. Is that colonizers came and said, that language is not important, don't teach it to your kids. And our parents and our grandparents felt conflicted.
I always talk about this memory I have of my Nananbiha in her last days speaking in Chamorro to my mom. And I was already in my early 20s at this time. And it was a pivotal moment in my life because I heard them speaking to each other and I realized I didn't understand anything they were saying. And I was losing that opportunity to ask my grandma questions, right? Because she was in her last days. And that was sort of the start of my cultural awakening and then my desire to begin speaking or learning Chamorro.
I visited Guam for the first time in 1997. There I had cousins, refer to me as a haole because my mom is of European descent. And so from that very formative thing, it's like, oh, I didn't grow up on Guam, and my mom's white, so I'm not allowed to claim Chamorro identity or speak the language. I thought that was, even though I yearned for it, I wanted it, I craved it, I definitely shared with non-Chamorros that I was Chamorro, but anytime I was around Pacific Islanders or indigenous people, I felt like I had to hide that.
With so few Chamorro speakers, like we think about the possible loss of our language and the possible loss of our culture that comes along with that. And that really got me thinking about then, not only in like an academic sense, but also in a personal sense, like how am I responding to that possible loss?
Really, it's some of the happiest moments of my entire life have been speaking Chamorro with my dad just in these past few years. And I also see it as my responsibility as like an ancestor in training.
And we need artists telling our stories, sharing the beauty of our people, sharing the struggles of our people, and drawing our people out of erasure. So I would say that is the biggest thing that language learning has contributed to my art, is just this, it's really strengthened my own participation in the movement. I'm not someone who's super vocal or in the spotlight, but I'm doing my part of decolonizing through learning our language and saying that we are still here and we have spoken these words for 4,000 years and we'll continue to speak them, into the future.
Biba. Hungan, ay, bonito en un episode 192 of Fanachu Hungan from 2022, February 2022, episode 192. Oh, and so I should go on to point out, though, that, from Clarissa Mingiola, from that episode is, Esta Kapaski Lenguajita and Alex White, Tadung, both of them have, as part of their learning journey, have dedicated themselves to helping others through Programan Sinipuk, the annual Chamorro language immersion program. And even Senora Chris Carbazito from that episode, continued to attend my Zoom Chamorro classes. But her learning journey is important too because, she grew up hearing lots of Chamorro, but as she was saying in that episode, it wasn't emphasized. And so hers was a return to a language that was already in her, but the speaking of it was never emphasized or encouraged. And so once it was encouraged, it came out and it allowed her to reconnect to so many memories and to family members, and also to feel new connections to her family, to her island, to all of these things that just weren't there before. And so part of what is important about that series and language learning in general is just because you understand maski palabra sanay. You learn, of course, that learning your language is far more than just the words themselves. And so, okay, oh man, I am talking way too much, but I think I'm talking way too much, but I think we're almost halfway done. And so the next episode here, we're going to go back now to 2021, episode 144. And this episode was lots of fun because this episode was the 500th anniversary of Magellan passing through Guam episode. And so Manny Cruz, the godfather of Fanachu, came back. Annie Faye Camacho, who who has had her own regular series on Fanachu for years. Half a Day with Annie Faye joined Jesse Tatwilaf, who's basically the oldest Fanachu patron, and Artemia Perez. They all joined for a conversation about what does Magellan mean? What is his legacy for the Chamorro people 500 years later? And so, Nihita Ekongok Este.
The news came out that this was going to be an event, like the 500 celebration of Magellan's navigation. In the beginning, it was really easy for everyone to kind of be angry about it and dismiss it, saying like, why would I celebrate this? Why am I going to be a part of an event that was actually kind of the beginning of a destructive era for a people and just for a region? Because not doing the event seems like it's a form of resistance, seems like it's a form of protest, but really it's a missed opportunity to have a voice. You're celebrating Magellan, but we want to celebrate that period in our own way. We want to show you that we're still here, even despite everything that went on all the way back then.
When you say putting us on the map, it makes me think of the like Magellan's naming of our islands and calling us thieves and that whole discourse. Because so like before I went to sleep last night, my mind started thinking of like, what if this could be like a political cartoon, like something like that? And really, Magellan started to just look like someone who visited a restaurant and like didn't like the service, so he went on Yelp and called us and like gave us a low rating and like called us like, oh, these thieves, like, you know, after first complimenting like how nice things were and how we were skilled navigators.
So long as we're remembering, you know, where it came from, and so long as we know that what we have now today is something we made, this Chamorro Catholicism, and that's ours, and we don't have to give it up. And you know, it's something we love, but we do understand how we got it. We understand how they got it, how they gave it to us and gave it to everybody else. But I think just owning it and realizing the history of it is a you know, that's the important part.
As one of the ways to help the people of Guam is that there needs to be an apology somehow, because throughout the whole history of Guam and colonization, so not just from World War II, but just on and on and on, it's just the cycle of us being taken advantage of and abused, and you know, there's the idea of generational trauma.
So for me personally, I'm not interested in an apology from Spain unless it's followed through by like political action, and if there are any, unless it's followed through by any sort of implication to our current status, any sort of reparation.
I was trying to imagine what it would have been like to have been on those proas, just in the video there, and I felt a sense of pride. I'm glad that the navigation groups on Guam organized that. I think it was a statement. It's conflicting. I saw like a close-up picture of the ship and how, you know, the U.S. flag was raised above ours, and the discourse on that online was just like it's still a reminder that like we are still colonized and there are mixed feelings. I think we rose to the occasion.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, that was a fun conversation. I really like that reference to sort of Magellan, as Magellan naming naming us ladron as kind of like a Karen at a restaurant going angry wild on a Yelp review. The food was really good, but then the service was terrible. These thieves, 1 star. And so, but again, Fanachu is a place in which, you know, those types of conversations happen. And, you know, these sorts of things happen all over the place. They happen in you know, Gi Cocina en San Hijung. They happen in random places on social media. They happen, you know, lots of places. But it's nice to have a podcast, a place online, which is recorded, which is documented, in which they can also happen as well. All right. And so, Nihita Kunsigi, let's keep going. All right. And so for the next one, now, if you're on Guam, if you've been following the news lately, then you do know that Senator Will Parkinson just finished up 5 political status town hall meetings in different villages around Guam. Independent Guahan was at all of these, as were the other political status task forces, the Commission on Decolonization. Um, but this has brought out a lot of different sort of people asking questions. Some people are familiar with the history. Most people are not familiar with some of the history involved about political status. And every time there is sort of this surge in talk of political status, there is there are questions around a constitution for Guam. And so we have had a few episodes of Fanachu that have dived into a constitution for Guam, but also the history of Guam's failed constitution efforts, because these are important. Guam has attempted to pass a constitution before, but why did it fail? Why is it that the majority of voters back in the late 70s completely rejected a constitution for the island? What would be different today? This is important. And so for Fanachu episode 194, back in 2022, I invited on one of the activists who was instrumental at that time in protesting the passage of a constitution for Guam under sort of U.S. law. Now remember that the constitution that we're talking about is one that Congress enabled, but it would have to follow U.S. law, be within the restrictions, the confines of a territorial constitution under the United States. And part of the reason why people didn't like it, not just in Guam, but in other territories too, is because you don't get to deal with the major issues that affect you. You have to carbon copy U.S. constitutions. You can't make you can't make any major changes. You can't actually do anything that's different than the way the United States has already done things. It is not a document that is an expression of your self-determination, of your self-governance. It is simply just checking the box on American sort of political greatness. And so here is Hope Cristobal reflecting on the defeated Guam Constitution.
This was the time of the Vietnam War when, towards the end of the Vietnam War, and this awareness of a sense of peopleness, a peoplehood, and a sense of unity, especially here in Guam, because we saw all the participation unwittingly of our island in this Vietnam War. And so all this awareness happening, there had to be some answers to many questions that came out of the importance of our culture and our language. And of course, I believe that my generation is probably the last generation that could articulate in Chamoru, as well as are trying to pass it on to our children. So all these pressures of wanting to be a complete and a stable person during a time of turbulence, watching these big, huge trucks coming down from Naval Station, going through the capital city of Guam, going through the business district of Tamuning, up through the most populous village, Dedidu and Zigu, into the gates of this huge sign that said, "Peace is our profession." And I thought to myself, oh, well, that's what we want. So let's go for it. But by and large, we find out that, the war had really posed the questions to us about, do we really want this? And what is happening to our people and our island and our homeland, as we refer to Guam, our homeland. But also I saw the deterioration of our own community, how we began to feel the negative parts of our community. Say, for example, I realized that colonialism is alive and well in Guam, and that we need to at the least help ourselves. We were all either teaching Chamoru, or we were in the program at the university, and of course it was Robert Underwood's wife then who tried to put an ad. Actually, his family tried to put an ad in the newspaper in Chamoru, just saying happy birthday to the poor lady. That's all. And the PDN would not allow it. So we just decided, well, the only way we're going to do this, and we didn't have social media at the time, is that we just need to go out into the community, and we need to tell people that this institution would not allow the language, the indigenous language. And then we were beginning to be more comfortable with the use of the word indigenous. And yes, we organized over 700. We went to the SPIMA centers, and we told our manumkus that this is the policy of a major institution that purports to accurately depict our worldview, and would not even acknowledge that there is an indigenous community on this island. But more importantly, we need to bring our people together. We need to get our guests educated that this is that the status needs to lay the foundation of a constitution. You can't just write a constitution. You can't charter your government based on somebody's word that says, oh, well, let's have a constitution convention this year because it's political time and it's good for me and it sounds good and I'm going to win the next election. It is not that. I am sick and tired of hearing that same old trick. The kids of today are a lot more sophisticated. They are asking some real questions and they want some real answers. They want to address this organic act that hasn't really been good for us. We need to address our status, and we need to get our people to vote on status. So that's going to come down that line, but we want to be first-class citizens in our homeland.
Yeah. And so now remember that the whole episode, of course, you can watch it on YouTube. Um, because, it's an important part of the highlight there focuses really on what was the feeling of the people at that time. And this was a time in which there were more community protests that were coming out. And the thing is, the Constitution is meant to basically represent the feelings of the community. And the community can feel lots of different things. But what were the Chamorro people and what were other people feeling at that time? What are they feeling today? And so at that time, Chamorros were struggling with the after effects of Vietnam. People were struggling in general with those sorts of things. Um, and, the Constitution comes along, and if you had anything that you wanted to say or express, because one of the big things, of course, that came out there and then also came out when the Virgin Islands attempted to create their own constitution, was that in the second Guam Constitutional Convention, there was a discussion around can there be, because Chamorros were becoming a minority at that point, can there be some creation of a status for the Chamorro people? So because they're losing their status as the majority people, these are our island. This is our island, this is our home, but because we don't control immigration, because we don't have any rights, because the United States controls this place, can we create something in our Constitution that will protect our place here? And the only thing that they were allowed to do is basically say in the preamble, the home of the Chamorro people, which has no substantive, legal, political, anything behind it. And similar things have happened in other territories when they've tried to sort of do that. And so think today, about how if we tried to create a constitution, could you actually do anything to affect certain things? If you wanted to put certain things in it that might conflict with U.S. law, with U.S. federal law, with U.S. federal actions, with things and policies, with what stuff the United States is doing, stuff that the United States wants for Guam, you could not have it in there because as a territory, your constitution has to go and be approved by the United States government. And their goal is that your constitution simply just be this, this carbon copy of whatever, this basic, chat GPT American territory constitution BS. And the last part of the section that Hope, Senora Hope was talking about there was basically that one of the things that we know today is that political status is a tough issue. Trying to kind of get the community to a place in which the Chamorro people in particular are confident and educated where they can express their voice on what they'd prefer for a self-governing, genuinely self-governing option for the future. But politicians who don't know this issue very well or are afraid tend to try to offer the Constitution as some ridiculous BS sort of thing like, oh, we shouldn't deal with that. Let's just write our Constitution instead. Not really thinking about, does it make any sense? Would it be even useful or helpful? They just offer it as this sort of easy sort of plan B or plan C, a politically sort of convenient other opportunity instead of trying to be a leader on a difficult issue. All right, we're almost done. We've got two more highlights that we are going to go through. And so one of the things that we have been doing on Fanachu, and I'm very proud of it in response to our requests from our viewers and our patrons, is that we try to have, if not every month, at least every 2 months or so, Finut Chamoru episodes of Fanachu. There's Finut Chamoru content segments and so on that Fanachu does, but we try to have for our weekly episodes, if not every month, at least every 2 months, a Finut Chamoru episode in which the Guahunay dyan i-bisita nay, i-konversasyon nay, i-kwentos mami nay, masusese din nay, gi Finut Chamoru. And so we've kept this going. We've had dozens of Finut Chamoru episodes with people in the diaspora, people in Guam, people in the CNMI. And so here is episode 161, featuring attorney Peter Santos, musician and professor Joy Francas, and Defunto Kin Concepcion, who was, of course, a great friend of Fanachu, who produced the Cuentos Guahan, who hosted the Cuentos Guahan series, the Dikikina Finut Chamoru podcast that we put out for a few years. And so nihita ekungok esti.
Recommenda na para ta diskutis ti na asunto po di Organic Act sa kalanuri pa para na megay na kita taweta no ti magof comprendi hafes ti na dokumento. Da tagigilek mo sinya ha mafunas haji no nisita ta hasu haji tumugi isti na dokumento. Ko hita ni man Chamoru tumugi isti. Ko ginin hita i principat gobernamento di Amerika by the people for the people, no? Lo ti matititi na principat esti Organic Act sa Congreso ng Amerika tumugi. Ang ginon taytay Organic Act kula na no abado no ha osgi Constitution Amerika kula na matulia Filipino English ma-copy and paste, no? Todo diretso dan todo sistema gobernamento. Pues kau ginin ikuturan Chamoru esti na dokumento na mafotma.
Taja hafa minaulegna no parehita como taja bosta desapareció mas sucedi hafa minalagutnya pudi hebtu tagini pagu i build up ni para militar wini jan hafa sia mas sucedi distia zona tempo di ani man muktu tati zaman afen libre di 44 na sakta no bula di masyala yung para guauti ti para minaulika i tau niya para siya i minaulik gana taja hafa no sinya pada tasangan hunggan mapaputetehit on mencionar este pira gila tatafan niya man mapaputetehit hunggan mapaputetehit sa itano niya mapaputetehit di tau-tau mapaputetehit
i kooperasyon i Amerikano masih militar niya di sigya matuli i tanu i Chamoru pa famanak sa marine base sigya matuli sigya madisrespeta i inaftan i manaynata siya gi papa gi animangay gi marine base the pagwanling niya wow we're open for public comments the bula siyang tawto I did a comment niya off of that yeah swati Joey kumu tay bukod si comment manasuway comment section tinasudo couple of months ago na manasuway comment section whoops something wrong with the internet let's extend this they don't care una putiyaw ani matumpo gitimomo dispensay lo bilsoga talong imanago zo safa sa zokuhaw I own you finodita to ni fiya magang gatig station staba I own you
Again, and one thing that I enjoy about the Finot Chamoru episodes for Fanachu is that, of course, oftentimes, for many people, of course, we use Finot Chamoru for certain types of topics, right? If you're kind of saying hello to somebody, if you're in church, if you're singing, maybe, right? But as you saw from that conversation there, that was a conversation in which we were talking about the Organic Act, we were talking about the buildup. And so the Finot Chamoru episodes deal with a wide variety of topics, and it's really nice. It's really nice, sort of to see the language being used to talk about all the different things that Chamorros are facing nowadays. All right, here we go. Estigi y último. This is the last highlight that we are going to focus on for today, and so this one is because episode 215 from 2022, and this one has Dr. Jessie Lujan Bennett, where she is talking about nurturing Chamorro diasporic communities. And so we've had a number of episodes talking about, the diaspora, the Chamorro diaspora, and one of the main listening audiences that Fanachu has is the diaspora, which uses Fanachu as a means to connect with what's happening back home in Guam and in the Marianas. And so, nihita ekung.
So we use diaspora, especially within academic context. I don't know if that's always the right word for us. Different kinds of folks have their own ways of describing the movements of their peoples. So maybe there's a term in Chamorro that we have or that we might come up with as a people to describe our specific kind of movement that's rooted in a long history of mobility, that also is rooted in a more contemporary migration of our peoples that is tied to the US colonization of our islands and the pathways that have opened up because of it. So long story short, I guess Cliff Notes version is that diaspora has many different ways of being used, and for Chamorros, maybe that's not the right term for us because of the nuance of our movements. But for me in my research at the moment, it kind of fits the conversation. We're having this new phenomena of Chamorros moving in numbers that we've never seen before. We have Chamorros that have been on the move ever since, which is really fun to talk about in some context where sometimes it feels a bit heavy and hard to hear that, Underwood has argued that in his earlier work that Chamorros are the thing that is on the go, that is our export from our islands. But when you put it within a larger context of of movement. We've always been on the go. We are people rooted in mobility. We're known for our canoes. We're known for having those relationships with neighboring islands. We are a mobile people, and that's like at the heart of who we are. In terms of the military being a pathway for our movement, and that's something that I'm looking at because we have so much discussion around how the militarization of our islands has had and continues to have detrimental impacts on our people, the land, the ocean, our skyscapes, etc. But as someone who grew up in the States, I'm also thinking about how can I contribute to this conversation to also problematize our movement and migration that's tied to the military. So my grandfather ended up joining the Navy, like many of his peers, and ended up leaving Guam in the 60s. And this is, right after Typhoon Karen, when the island is also going through another kind of wave of being rebuilt. And then you start to see this outflux of Chamorro families going abroad. So while the military is rebuilding our islands to fit its needs and introducing a wage-based economy that we've never had before in these kinds of ways that suit their needs, then we have folks like my grandfather trying to figure out, like, what do I do for my family and what do we do? And so that's my family story. And this kind of military within my family that continued on. And, I was an Army brat for some time growing up. It continues on. So you start to see the initial movements. And then sometimes there's that second kind of movement within families where we're moving around the states. And I tell my students, I tell other Chamorros that I hang out with that we really have to be easier on one another because there are a lot of us and we have very different ways of understanding our Chamorro-ness. So being Chamorro in San Diego is not the same as being Chamorro here in Guam. It's totally different. We have overlap in things, but we have different contexts, different social, cultural, geographic contexts that shape us in different ways. So we're still Chamorro. We're Chamorro if we're mixed. We're Chamorro if we live abroad. We're Chamorro if we're here within the Marianas. But also the nuance of our experience is really important that we acknowledge when we tell our stories, when we try to relate to one another. And, having a grandmother like Miss Guadalupe Lujan here made it so that when I come home, I'm part of a huge family, and I've also learned from her that you just have to, especially if you're coming back home, relax, like be quiet, don't say too much, chill out for a minute, because we didn't grow up in this context. So we think we know something in the States, but that is one particular way of being Chamorro. When you come here and you want to be of help and you want to be in service and you want to be in community, part of that is also taking a step back and allowing folks to tell you like what it's been like here and where you can help and where your skills could be utilized. For those of us in diasporic spaces, we have to work a little bit harder to be connected to one another, to be connected to other Chamorros, to be connected to the Marianas. But it's not impossible. We're hungry for connection. And I think whatever way you can connect is valid. And whatever you got, if it's a t-shirt or a decal, or maybe it's a dissertation, they're all valid ways of experiencing your Chamorro-ness.
Iba. Ay, ade. Gifpogwanay sinanganya si Dr. Jesse Hungan. It's a beautiful way to end this episode because Fanachu, it has over the years evolved to be a space for Chamorro stories more than anything. There's lots of things that Fanachu tackles. There's lots of things that Fanachu covers, but at its heart, it has become a place for Chamorro stories. And so, Sidus Masi for tuning in to this episode, focusing on a number of highlights of Fanachu episodes that cover a number of different topics, that resonated with me as I was going back over the 370 episodes that we have. And so I'm looking forward to next year, which will be the 10th year for Fanachu, and seeing what we can do in order to help celebrate and commemorate that 10 years for this 10 years for this podcast. Lo, esti Fanakpo para este episode Fanachu si Jus Masi put in a